What's up, gang? This is the X-Teen Featurette channel. I'm Chris, and I am in the old abandoned guest bedroom today. It is dreary, so, change of scenery. I needed something a little more cozy and inviting. So here, and I was like, you know what? I don't own this movie that I'm talking about today, so, why appear to you in front of my collection when this is not part of it? I'm going to be reviewing Soylent Green. My buddy, Alex the Activist on YouTube, Alex the Activist 2 on Instagram, told me to review this. And I was like, you know what? I have never seen that. So yeah, let me do that. This is, and I decided to borrow this from the library rather than just buying it because I have only ever heard not good things about Soylent Green. So this is a 1973 flick directed by Richard Fleischer. We have Charlton Heston obviously in this. I have only ever heard that this was like mediocre. Obviously it's a part of pop culture, so most of my reviews are spoiler free. I'm going to be giving spoilers in this one because I feel like living in society has spoiled this for all of us. Soylent Green is people. So that's all that I knew about this. Soylent Green is people, whatever. I thought that I knew the movie because I knew that. So here we are. So like I said, borrowed this from the local public library. That's always an option. If you have a local public library, I certainly hope that you do. So yeah, I was really happy to be able to check this out without having to invest dollars into it. So the tagline on the front says, it's the year 2022, people are still the same, they'll do anything to get what they need, and they need Soylent Green. So there's a sense of desperation. So here's a disclaimer. I'm going to be talking about the plot of this, basically in its entirety, and then I'm going to be delving into some personal thoughts and opinions. So if you don't want to hear my personal thoughts, why are you here? But there you go. So maybe you might think that some of this is political. I don't think so. I would say, like I said, this is a 1973 flick. This is based on a novel by Harry Harrison called Make Room, Make Room from 1966. So what I gather from listening to the commentary on here and like some other stuff that I've read about this is that the novel was very just focused on, I haven't read it, but I will look for it now. I'm gonna try to hunt it down and read it because I love dystopian novels. So the novel seems like it's much more focused on population, like the excess surplus population being a problem to humanity. Soylent Green, on the other hand, is definitely about surplus population being an issue, but it touches on different issues that I guess weren't part of the book too. This is definitely in the science fiction subgenre of eco-fiction. Other films that I can think of, the first film that I think of that fits into this is like Wall-E, the animated movie. I also very much like that, and it has a lot of similarities to this actually. Soylent Green starts out with just monochrome images from like the beginning of industrialized civilization to, like sort of the industrial revolutions to where we are today in 1973. And like the population is just growing, and then it's supposed to just, I guess, signify that it's continuing to grow, and then it fast forwards to the year 2022, which is when this takes place. So that slideshow kind of focuses on farmers and people, in markets, and then people, the advent of the assembly line and space and flight and all of these things, industrial settings. And then it just shows crowds of people and crowds of people wearing like surgical masks on their face, and crowds of people, just a lot of people. It's basically saying, hey, look, there's a lot of damn people here. And the other thing I noticed, like in this, there's a lot of focus on landfills. Just seeing that incorporated into this slideshow of basically the history of humanity in the scope of this film, I was like, okay, I get where this is going. It was really weird that this takes place in 2022, and here I am seeing glimpses of people wearing masks over their face, and it's just kind of like, you may have forgotten because we've been conditioned to think that that's normal, but it's not. 3 years ago, you'd never see people doing that in public in America. Maybe in some other countries, but not in America. It wasn't normal by any means. So it was weird. It was weird seeing that. So we cut to New York City in 2022. They say that the population is 40 million. It's like text that pops up on the screen, so we are given a lot of information. In 1973, the population of New York City was 7.9 million. Today, like in 2022, it's actually just the city itself, not the metropolitan statistical area. The city itself is like 8.8 million. So in Soylent Green, saying that the population is like 40 million, that means that New York City has seen like a 5-fold increase in population, which is pretty damn big. And I'm also very surprised that from 1973 to 2022, it's only seen like a 12% increase. That's a lot lower than I would have expected. The first person that we're introduced to is Charlton Heston's character. He is a detective named Thorne. He like turns on the TV and there's a guy talking on the news about Soylent Red and Soylent Yellow on the TV. It was like a news like infomercial, which, I mean, all news is basically an advertisement anyway. That was pretty spot on. But the TV, it was like a TV from 1973. All the technology in this movie was not like an imagined sense of technology. Like they weren't like, oh, we're gonna have flying cars. It was all very much like technology, and pretty much industry stopped in 1973. So it's kind of like industry stopped, but the humanity kept going, like increasing, is kind of the theme of this movie. So we have like a 1973 era television set, and the guy's watching this, this man tell us, oh, Soylent Red and Soylent Yellow are very highly concentrated protein, and Soylent Green is in short supply because it's such a, it's such a favorite, and it's made of plankton. So we're given this kind of background information about what these things are. We're not really sure what they are, but we're told that. Then we meet our second character, Saul. He's played by Edward Robinson. This is actually his final performance, which is very weird and sad. So he's telling Thorne, they used to have real food. And he goes on telling Thorne about how, they used to have meat. We used to be able to get meat, and we used to have fresh lettuce, and he's telling him all these luxuries, and we get the sense that they just don't have food anymore.
Let's eat something. I'm not hungry enough yet. It's not bad. Tasteless, odorless crud. You don't know any better.
As he's telling him this story of, all these foods that we used to have back in the day, the lights begin to dim and kind of flicker, kind of like a brownout or something. So Saul hops on a stationary bike and begins to pedal like it's a generator, like he's a little hamster on a wheel, and he's like turning on the light bulb. That's literally what's going on here. And it's like, okay, so this is some kind of like third world living scenario that we have going on in New York. As Thorne's leaving, Saul tells him, go with God, which is interesting. It's something my Polish grandmother used to say. So he tells him go with God, and then the cop walks out of the apartment building, and just like the steps and the hallway of this apartment are littered with people. So he has a tiny rundown apartment, and then you take a step out of it and you're like, oh, he's actually living the good life, because there's people in the hall crowding each other, and he has to like literally step between them to get down the stairs. It was very, just that first few minutes of this movie just set up such a bleak universe that this is taking place in. So then it cuts to like a very lavish apartment, very mod, very stylish. They have air conditioning, they have food, they have drink. There's this like really hot girl, and she's playing an arcade game, so they have no problem with electric. So the girl's going out to go get some groceries for this rich old dude that she lives with. We don't know the relationship yet, but she's like, oh yeah, I got my curfew pass, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like nonchalantly dropped that there's a curfew pass. And it's like, okay, there's the second thing that in America, that shouldn't be a thing that we have, but it's like people have been conditioned to think that it's normal to have these basic rights taken away from you. So being able to leave your apartment or your house is something that they can't do in this dystopian future. But it just so happens that there's been so many people now that are conditioned to thinking that that's normal also. It's not normal. It's not normal for your government to tell you, hey, you have to stay in your house now. This is the time where you are no longer allowed to leave. So that, it's just like watching this through today's lens. I'm like, okay, like this may not disturb some people as much as it should. So the girl that went out to get groceries, her name is Cheryl, and she is a piece of furniture. She is part of that apartment that she lives in, and she just basically is there to do whatever for the rich old guy that lives there. So she goes out with a bodyguard to pick up groceries, and she gets like this measly, like, it's really depressing looking, just like a couple pieces of vegetables, and, just, it's not even enough to sustain a person for a week, but they ring her up at $279. So there's inflation for you. And then she's like, oh, what about my special order? And this is it's not a grocery store. It's more like a dispensary. It's a chain link fence, and like there's one guy handing out like, oh, here you go. So it's more like a dispensary. And then he brings her around the back, and there's her special order is like one slab of meat, like a very small, modest portion of beef, hanging in this cooler. So, and he's going on about how, oh, this is so special and out of the ordinary. So people in this world just do not eat meat. It's just like this unheard of luxury that you have to be rich beyond normal means to afford this. So while they're out, the old guy's name is Simonson. Some dude like comes there with a crowbar, and he knows that he's there to kill him, and he just like accepts it. And it was a really interesting exchange. It was a very somber exchange between those two. And it told us a lot about what's going on. So we learn at some point that Simonson is a board member on the Soylent company. So he is like one of the, Soylent is obviously sustaining humanity to some degree, and he is on the board of that company. So no wonder the dude's like rolling in dough. Okay, so somebody has a hit out on him, so why? So then Cheryl and the bodyguard come back to the place, and she's just like overwhelmed because she actually kind of liked this guy. He was nice to live with. And the sanitation crew like comes and takes the body out. And the people that are dealing with the corpse are telling the police, oh, they're backed up at the disposal facility. Don't know when we'll be able to get to this one. So, and then Cheryl kind of muses to herself, like when my grandmother died, we had a ceremony for her. She distinctly says, I remember that. Like it's something it's so far in the past, and it hasn't been done in such a long time that it's like, no, I know we used to do it this way. Like, this is not normal. It's like she has to, like, tell herself to remember how things actually were. I know that we used to have ceremonies for the dead. A refuse collection man coming up and taking away this body, that's not how we're supposed to be doing things. It's like she's telling herself, this isn't right. Next, Thorne shows up at Simonson's apartment to do he's obviously a detective, he shows up to do some questioning, and it's interesting because he just takes a pillowcase and just starts looting the place. He takes alcohol, and he takes soap, a bar of soap. He's like, oh my God, look, this is the biggest piece of soap I've ever seen. He takes soap, he takes food, like this really mangled, wilted piece of celery. He's like, oh my God, this is beautiful. So, we get it. It's kind of like he's taking advantage of his position by helping himself to whatever's in the house. And the furniture there, Cheryl is just like, oh, whatever, let him do this. So that's what made the biggest impact on me. That's pretty much the introduction to the movie. Then we have some scenes that kind of play out. There's a lot of really great scenes between Saul and Thorne, and after Thorne takes this food back to Saul, he prepares it, and he's like, oh, this is what you're missing. And it adds a level to the film. Like, Thorne really didn't know what something as simple as, like, it looked like a beef stew or something, and strawberry preserves. So he didn't know what these things were. And, it's like in him teaching his friend, Saul kind of just, it seems like he gets more and more depressed as the movie goes on. He had this one line where Thorne said something about, oh, how did we let it get this way or something, and Saul just says, oh, nuts, you know, people were always rotten, but the world was beautiful. And I'm like, man, if that isn't the truth, you know? So that is kind of like the background. Now I'm going to get into some spoilers and just go balls to the wall, hog wild on this one. So we learned that the chief of police, he is like fully aware that Thorne is taking things from people's houses. It's like known and acknowledged and totally fine. But we also learned that the chief of police is working with the government, like the governor. Thorne doesn't have any idea, and it's like Thorne is trying to uncover what's really going on and who really killed Simonson. And it's like, we don't really get too far into why the governor isn't really helping him. He's not trying to impede him at all. But, you know, he kind of tells him like, oh, it's fine, just, you know, go back to riot duty. And that's pretty much it. He doesn't impede him, but at the same time, it's like Thorne doesn't understand that his boss is working with ulterior motives that are above Thorne's head. So Saul and Thorne uncover that Simonson was on the board of Soylent. He went to church, and whenever we go to this church, it was just littered with people like everything else, and the pastor or the father was just totally inundated with people to help out, and he was scatterbrained. Before Simonson died, we learned from Cheryl that he went to this church and confessed to the father there. And whenever we were there with the father, that church was just so depressing. It was just like you would expect. It was just wall to wall with people, and it was just, you know, everyone was just sleeping, no energy, just like hungry. Every time you see these people in this movie, they're just laying around, not doing anything. And it's like, I guess that's what people do whenever they're hungry, right? In the second act of the movie, Thorne gets put on crowd control, and for Tuesday, Soylent Green Day, because Soylent Green is so scarce that we know that it's going to run out, and whenever it does run out, there's going to be riots. So there's police with, it looks like football helmets, but like they're on the riot squad, and they are there telling people they have to make the announcement that Soylent Green is sold out, and you need to disperse. So everyone starts to riot once they say that Soylent Green is no longer available, and they're like, oh, it's Tuesday. You know, they can't fathom that there's no more Soylent Green. So then the police announce the scoops are coming, the scoops are coming. The scoops are basically front load garbage trucks with like a bucket, and the bucket just goes through this dense crowd of people and scoops the people up and throws them into the back of the truck and then carries them away. While Thorne is out working, Saul leaves a note that says, I'm going home. Thorne finds it and immediately knows where he is going. Saul goes to this place. It's like a mix between a medical facility and like an old folks home maybe. So you get there and it's like very sterile looking, just very cold. But there's these people taking people's information in, like taking onboarding stuff. It's mainly like old people and people on crutches that are in the lines. So Saul gets to the front of the line. The people say, what's your name? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite kind of music? And it's like, what is going on here? These people in white coats give him a drink and then put a blanket over him. Thorne gets there just in time to witness the rest of it, but he is in a room and this orange glow washes over the room, and then there's just classical music playing. So, and they promised him it would take a full 30 minutes. So the entire room is one big screen, and on the screen we see like just things from nature, very peaceful, like what you would see on, like, I don't know, like in a doctor's office or something. So there's like sunrises and, you know, brooks and oceans and forests and animals and all these things that are just very beautiful. And, you know, this whole scene was just very, very upsetting. You have an inclination of what's going on there before this happens, but as soon as the video starts playing, you're like, okay, this dude is just done for. He went here to basically to be euthanized, and that's what happened. So before he goes, though, he says to Thorne, you have to go to the exchange, you have to tell them. So then he dies. The people in the white coat roll him out, and you know, Thorne kind of like makes his way down to the basement of the building, and he finds all of the bodies. They're in like these white bags. They're loaded into these garbage trucks. The garbage trucks go to another facility. Thorne hops right on a garbage truck, goes and sees what they're doing. He follows the bodies all the way through this facility. It was very tense. You know that he is, it was being guarded by like armed guards. We hear over and over again that the disposal facilities are guarded, and you can't go there. So we get to actually see that whenever he hops right on the garbage truck. As he follows the bodies through the facility, he sees them coming out the other end, and he sees that they are turned into Soylent Green crackers. And that's it. He's mortified. He rushes to the exchange to tell everybody, stop eating Soylent Green. Soylent Green is people. Before he does that, he calls his boss to say, hey, I'm here. I need backup. And he doesn't know his boss is working with the governor. He makes his way to the church, and that's where he is shot by one of the bodyguards. And as he's, you know, talking to his boss, he's trying to convey the information. He thinks his boss is unaware. So that's the famous, or I should say infamous, scene where he's being rolled out and screaming, Soylent Green is people, Soylent Green is people. The line that's lost by pop culture, though, is they're making our food out of people. Next thing, they'll be breeding us like cattle for food. So whenever you take all of that in its entirety, it is very, very grim.
They're making our food out of people. Next thing, they'll be breeding us like cattle for food. You gotta tell them. You gotta tell them.
Promise, Tiger, I promise. I'll tell the exchange.
You tell everybody. Listen to me, Hatcher. You gotta tell them. Soylent Green is people. We gotta stop them somehow.
What's very beautiful about this is that it then cuts to credits, and the video that plays whenever the credits roll is the same video that Saul saw as he was, you know, in the euthanasia facility with all the beautiful scenery and stuff. I was like, what an eerie end to this movie. How incredibly eerie. Some things I wanted to note. They said that it's always like 90 degrees or hotter, global warming, which, you know, global warming they expected to exist in the future. So he's always very sweaty looking. It looks like he is very hot. There's very muted color, so it's just that very dreary, depressed feeling. Like I said, like they didn't really attempt future technology, but in some cases I think that's kind of weird. But in this case, I just got the feeling that you know, everything kind of stopped at one point in time. So it's almost like, you know, Saul was there for normal civilization, and then something happened that caused, and everything's always broken. Like the chief of police's watch is broken, you know. Thorne doesn't have running water in his apartment. He has like this big cooler that he uses to like use the tiny bar of soap that he stole and wash his hands. So everything's always broken perpetually. He goes into someone's house and asks about an incinerator, and she's like, oh, it hasn't worked in years. So it's just like whenever things break, they aren't fixed, and there's no replacing it because you just don't have the means to replace anything. You barely have the means to feed yourself. This was directed, as I said, by Richard Fleischer, and this is just like an anecdote, but I think it's very funny, is that Fleischer is German for butcher. Fleisch is German for meat or flesh, Fleisch. So Fleischer means butcher, and I think that's very, very funny and kind of coincidental. Richard Fleischer is known for like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that stuff. I mentioned before that the film has more of a dehumanization than the novel. This movie came out in 1973, which was the same year as Roe v. Wade, so there was that going for women's rights. But fast forward to 2022, and we have furniture in the apartments. So we have Cheryl. There was one scene where she actually told Thorne, don't speak about me like that. She didn't like being called furniture. It's not like she had no sense of humanity in her. It's almost like an indentured servant type deal. So in the year that Roe v. Wade came out and was a major win for women's rights, this movie came out and depicted women in this sort of slave role, really, which is very interesting and very dehumanizing. The final topic that I've just been dancing around is that you don't know what you're actually eating. I have been vegetarian for 10 years. 10 years I have not eaten meat, so this was really interesting to me, and this is the real reason that Alex the activist told me to talk about this movie, because this is 100% an example of predictive programming, because everything that we are consuming today in modern society is poison. And okay, here's where you can, write me off and say that I'm nuts or whatever. They mentioned in Soylent Green, I think it was Saul's character that said it began when they poisoned the water. And I was like, well, hell, they already poison our water supply. Fluoride is a neurotoxin. And if you think I'm nuts, like, you need to read about fluoride. There are so many dentists, like literal American dentists, that say that fluoride being in the water is of no benefit. Fluoride doesn't have any benefit whenever it's ingested. Fluoride has benefit to your teeth whenever you put it on your teeth topically, like you do with toothpaste. They put fluoride in our water and people just think that it's okay. It's actually a byproduct of manufacturing. So, yeah, look it up. All this talk about fluoride's making me thirsty for fluoride. So there's that. I do drink distilled water. We have natural flavors. Do you know what natural flavors are? Do you think that whenever you eat, something that's like lemon flavored and it says natural flavors, that it's actually using some like sort of essence of lemon? It's not. That's just one of those loopholes where manufacturers can put whatever they need to into the food to make it that much more addictive and satisfying. And they just label it as natural flavors. Natural flavors is a crock. And what we have, like literally in 2022, is a vegan agenda. We have this agenda. They sold us the fact that, cows and livestock are depleting the ozone layer or something with the methane. And that is just, factory farms ruin the environment. Factory farms are terrible for the environment. That doesn't necessarily mean that meat is. I think that sustainable meat is a great idea. As someone that's been vegetarian for 10 years, I think that sustainable meat is probably the best thing for our environment. You have companies like Beyond and Impossible making their products are carcinogenic. Their products literally cause cancer. And you have them selling them to people like it's a healthy alternative to a real burger. It's not. It's not. Just go to your local farm and talk to a farmer and buy your meat from somewhere that you can actually see the cows where they came from. That is the best thing. Oddly enough, who's been buying up American farmland faster than anybody? Somebody that also had a lot to do with all the V's that everybody took. He's not a doctor or a farmer, but old Billy Boy, yeah, he's been buying a lot of American farmland. So I don't know what to take of that, but I do know that I'm in contact with a local farmer in my area, and I think that you should probably be too. There's literally just so much to unpack. People have so much caffeine, so much sugar. Look up what the American Heart Association suggests as your recommended daily allowance of sugar. It's probably what most people eat in one serving. The ingredient lists and everything are just out of control. Like ketchup has like 30 ingredients. Like why? It should just be like tomatoes, vinegar, salt, like sauce, chocolate, bread. Why does bread have like 30 ingredients? Like I can make bread. I can literally make bread with 2 ingredients. Why do you have 30 in most commercial breads? And then there's the fact that all of our soil is just like totally depleted of nutrients on all these like factory farmlands. So it's like the food that we are eating isn't even like as nutritious as it should be. Not to mention the fact that I think that if you buy something that's organic, they're probably lying to you to some degree. I think that's pretty much a scam. Then there's the fact that there's an actual product that exists called Soylent. And years ago, I used to drink this until I realized that it contains aspartame, because I do not mess with any artificial sweeteners at all. So Soylent is a liquid meal replacement. It has aspartame in it, but there's literally people that exist on just meal replacers. They're mostly like nerds that are just like, oh, I don't have time to like devote to cooking and all this stuff. This is the bare minimum for what a human needs to function. And there's people that it's like their lifestyle, and they have to like resort to chewing gum because their jaw gets atrophied by only drinking liquid. There's people that are making the choice like, what, I would have more time to play this stupid ass game that came out and really sucks. I'd have more time to play this if I didn't have to make myself a bowl of cereal. Like, my advice to everybody watching this is you should probably spend a little bit more time looking at your nutritional labels and learning about nutrition, because you should probably take care of yourself a little bit better. That's Soylent Green. I absolutely loved this movie. I thought that it was just like completely profound. I thought that it was a really unconventional take. But I thought that it was eerily accurate. Watching it in 2022, I very much enjoyed it, and I will be buying this because I will be watching this in the future. There's a really awesome commentary on here too by Lee Taylor Young, who plays the Cheryl, the furniture, and the director Richard Fleischer. So I listened to part of that, and it was really good. Even if Richard Fleischer is for population control, which I think is really evil. I don't know. I think that humanity is able to sustain itself. I think that if we revert back to, living in communities instead of getting all of our food from Walmart and China, I think that we'd be able to do pretty well for ourselves. So that's my TED Talk. Thanks for watching the X-Teen Featurette channel. I am a nutrition conspiracy theorist. I love Soylent Green. I think you should watch it. If you think that you know everything about this movie because you know Soylent Green is people, then you don't really know anything, just like I didn't prior to watching this. So if you made it this far without unsubscribing, thank you. I very genuinely appreciate it. If you'd like to discuss or argue or debate anything with me about anything that I said, or if you'd even like to just talk about Soylent Green as a movie, I am down to do any of that. Keep it civil. I have a master's in economics, so I'm not scared of some scientific literature if you want to throw some stats at me. But that's Soylent Green. I think that it is one of the best science fiction movies that I've seen, quite honestly. Very much enjoyed it. I think that I will be watching The Omega Man in the near future. Maybe I'll have another conspiracy rant for you then. I don't know. Look for it. Thanks, Alex the activist, for suggesting I talk about this and go down that rabbit hole. It's probably pissed some people off, but whatever. It's just a movie, bro. And with that, I invite you to come back next week and see if I talk about something a little more palatable, pun intended. So I will see you then, unless you unsubscribed. Bye.